Fact of life, if you've got a woman's hormones, you are going to menstruate for a long time and you can use it.
From the Mamma Mia podcast network, I'm Mia Friedman and this is No Filter. Real stories that will make you lean in. Now, it was only a matter of time before I did an episode about periods, and here we are. But it's not what you think. Well, not quite what you think. Because when I first came across Lucy Peach, who calls herself the period preacher, by watching a YouTube video, I thought what you're probably thinking now. What on earth? That sounds hectic. And I'm totally not interested in howling at the moon. That's not who I am. Well, maybe you are, but it's not my thing. For the past 30 years, when I've got my period, it's just been something I've kind of endured. I haven't celebrated it, but I haven't really suffered with it because I'm lucky enough not to have painful periods or endometriosis. I have a lot of friends and relatives who do suffer from painful periods. But if you're one of the women who doesn't, it's just kind of, well, it's sort of an inconvenience. You just sort of get on with it. Anyway, the thing about Lucy Peach is that she has discovered a way to hack your period. Now, I know that the words hack and period together in a sentence are a bit gross, but stay with me. Lucy has worked out the secret to using your period for power. Not like electrical power or woo-woo power, but actual practical advice about understanding what you should be doing in the particular weeks of the month. And I swear to God, she has changed the whole way I think about my cycle. Lucy is a folk singer by trade, and she's also a comedian and a period whisperer. I saw her stand-up show, How to Period Like a Unicorn, which is the best name for a show I've ever heard, when I was in Perth last year, and it completely blew my mind, which is why I have invited her to share her wisdom. This is an absolute must-listen for anyone who has ever had or will have or knows anyone who has ever had a period. Here's Lucy Peach. Hello, Lucy.
Good morning, Mia.
How has periods become your work?
Well, I suppose I've always had a pretty good relationship with my period, and it's never been something that I've had any major problems with. But then when I became a sexual health educator and I was talking a lot about periods and all things to do with sexual health and relationships to kids in particular and all sorts of people, I came across this book called The Optimized Woman that really explained how you could rethink the way you think about periods. And it made so much sense to me, and I couldn't believe it wasn't just part of our vernacular. And I couldn't believe that it was still something that not only are people, still ashamed of and still kind of don't really want to talk about it, but just that we weren't using the good parts of it. So
the idea that there are good parts of it is a surprise to many. I went to your show at the Perth Fringe Festival when I was 46, just a few months ago.
You are not 46.
I'm 46.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am. That's what 46 looks like, babe. And I learnt so much. And I mean, I've had my period for how many years? More than 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I learnt so much in that. And you start your show, that show was called How to Period Like a Unicorn. And I love the idea, first of all, of period being a verb. That was awesome. And that was a show for younger girls. And there were some brothers in the audience, some little brothers, and there were some dads. And it was absolutely gorgeous. And you start your show by talking about sort of the three phases of first getting your period, then having your period, and then menopause. How do you describe those?
Well, there's this really beautiful saying. It's a Native American Indian saying, and it says that at a woman's first bleeding, she meets her power. In her bleeding years, she practices her power. And then at menopause, she becomes it.
That made me feel so good about heading towards menopause as
me
well.
Too,
I'm like,
me
I'm
too.
going to become my power.
Yes.
That sounds like a much better thing than I'm going to be like an old dried up raisin.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that the further we come with sort of lifting the lid on the ways that women's bodies have been spoken of in just such a negative way, you realise there is so much more. There's so much more potential that we can tap. And that beautiful idea that when you go through menopause, the only other creature that goes through menopause is an orca whale. And biologically speaking, you are of more benefit to not just keep having babies, but to pass on your knowledge and your wisdom. There's an evolutionary advantage to menopause, which is, of course there is, there's no accident,
Most of us throughout our menstruating years have a pretty simple, perhaps fraught relationship with our period. Either we've got it and it's a pain in the neck, we're about to get it and we're feeling shitty, or it's late and we're freaking out. None of those are very positive emotions, are they?
No. And if you add up the week before your period comes that you're feeling a little bit prickly maybe, and, we're cultured to feel like we're crazy, and then when you have your period you're a little bit inadequate and a bit sort of weakened, that's half your reproductively viable life. And it just blows my mind that we're supposed to have girls to the front and women ruling the world and doing all of these things if for half of the time they've got this ingrained belief that they are not as good or adequate as everybody else.
So let's get practical. And that's what I love about you. When I first heard about you, I thought maybe you were one of those kind of howl at the moon, make an artist's painting out of your menstrual blood or something. And I wasn't really down with that. I mean, more power to people who want to do that, but it wasn't really my bag. But then what I love about you is how practical you are with this knowledge. And I want you to explain about the different phases of our cycle and how we can harness them for good.
So it's really not rocket science, and everything that I say, I feel like people already know, really. It's just that we don't talk about it. And it's like a lady version of when you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. It's just like another lens to look at yourself through and work out what you need and how to get the best out of yourself. And fact of life, if you've got a woman's hormones, you are going to menstruate for a long time, and you can use it. You're right. So basically,
how do we life hack our period?
How do you life hack your period? So it begins on day 1, which is the day that you start menstruating or you start bleeding. And there are so many ways you can look at this. One of them is to liken your 4 phases to the seasons. So you have these 4 seasons.
Let's do that.
Yep. And they each come with their own strengths and benefits. Season 1 is winter, the day that you start bleeding. So all of your hormones are at rock bottom. Your energy levels are a little bit lower. Doesn't mean you need to spend the week in a onesie, crying over Netflix. It just means you're a little bit slower, a little bit more tender. And this is the time to really nurture yourself, to really fill up your cup, as it were. Because if you can actually sort of give yourself what you need and just, even if it's 1 hour of true deep rest, you're going to get so much more out of yourself for the rest of the month. If you don't take that opportunity to actually just...
So in that week, should you try to keep your calendar a little bit lighter, or should you...
Absolutely. So
change how you exercise?
Definitely. And, it's something that you can apply to everything. So, if you get asked to do something, a big favour or start a new project, if you can, just put it off for a couple of days.
Don't do it in that bleeding week.
Don't take on too much, especially, day 1 or day 2, whatever is your kind of biggest, heaviest day. And also, everyone, we always talk about how we need to meditate and relax. This is like the perfect window because you actually feel more easily able to drop into that sort of dreaminess and just, that big picture thinking where you can just sort of sink into all the possibilities, and whatever was maybe really annoying you in the few days before in, autumn when everything was kind of getting ready to fall away, things then maybe aren't that important. And if something is still really annoying you, then it's a real thing. When you've got your period that if something is still really giving you the it's your body telling you. It's not your hormones. That's right. So any further questions about winter?
I think I've got winter pretty down. Do you need a bit more sleep during winter?
Staying warm, more rest, going to bed a bit earlier. If you can just even have a nap. If you work somewhere and you've got the opportunity to just go and have a little cat nap in your lunch break and just put some warm socks on, just nurture yourself.
Yep. Okay. So what comes after winter?
So after winter is spring, and you are now getting ready for ovulation. So imagine a bird who's about to lay an egg and they just want to get their nest just right and everything's got to happen now and you're in a little bit of a frenzy and you've got rising estrogen. And I actually find this is the time when I can feel a little bit anxious because I'm looking at my to-do list and I've got all these things I want to do and I want to make muesli and start a vegetable garden and go rock climbing and
I don't want to do any of those things.
Well,
but I've got a lot of shit to do. I go through those phases where I'm like, is it that you've got a lot of creative energy or you feel more likely to be overwhelmed in spring?
For me, it's that this rising estrogen and the sort of urge to get all of these things done and the energy is kind of, it can sort of compound on itself and you can sort of feel a little bit like you're on a freight train. And
so what should you and shouldn't you do in week 2?
Well, basically, you have a lot more energy. You need less sleep. I find I get up earlier and I'm really just ready to go. So when I know that I've got something coming up and I'm, trying to put it off for that winter menstrual phase, I will push it out to that spring phase. Yeah, so all of the things that you've put off. And I always say that if you choose not to do something because you've got your period, you're not procrastinating, you're prioritising. It's your body's way of actually trusting that you've got this energy rise coming up and you can make the most of it.
Oh, I like that. All right. So spring is over, week 3.
So spring is also, you're quite single-minded. I find I can be a little bit impatient. I want to get the things done. I don't really want to sit and listen to how you feel, or it's not as kind of communicative. You want to get that project done. You're a little bit more kind of singular-minded. And then once your estrogen has peaked, you ovulate, and then all of a sudden it's a little bit softer. And you're still riding high on this energy, but it's more you want to collaborate and communicate and cooperate, and I want to hear your ideas, and you have more for other people. And this is the time when I always say, don't go and look at the greyhound adoption page or put your hand up for being the president of the PNC, because you're more likely to sort of make these big ticket promises of just spreading your love far and wide, and you'll be on the freeway and you can merge. I know you go and you've just got everything for everybody.
Yeah, right. I recognise that phase. And then the week after, you're like, what was I thinking?
That's right. Everybody's taking everything from me. I've got nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So the next week is
autumn. So now you're getting ready to do it all over again.
This is traditionally called your PMS week or your PMT week. This has pretty bad press, autumn.
It has really bad press. Such bad press. It really just needs a rebrand, And I think if you had to sort of put the problem in a nutshell, it's that, we have this idea of what, the ideal woman is, and no surprises for which phase we all feel like we have to be in all the time.
The giving, adopting the greyhound,
volunteering
for the PNC.
That's it.
Letting everyone merge in front of us on the freeway.
Exactly. And when you look at hormonally what's going on, all of your hormones are coming down. So once you ovulate, you start producing progesterone, and you're just swimming in all of these feel-good hormones. And once they start to come down, you're getting ready to let go again. You're getting ready to do it all over again. And so you're not emotionally where you were last week. And if you feel pressured to keep that level of generosity up, you're going to feel cranky. You're going to feel that sort of disconnect between what's going on in your body and how you're trying to be in the world, and sort of,
It's true what you say about feeling like people are taking things from you, and that it does sometimes feel like an irrational irritability. Like I heard it once described as when you walk down the street and you want to slap strangers across the face for no reason. Are you more aggro, or is it just that you have less tolerance for bullshit? Well,
I think you definitely it's a crunchy sort of feeling, because you don't, you have less energy. So when someone says, "Where's my sock? Have you seen the mayonnaise?" It's like, I'm getting ready to do important things biologically. I don't care about your sock. It's not part of my brief right now. I have that is not my priority. And it can feel like such an affront.
Yeah.
Particularly because the world doesn't acknowledge what's going on. So not only is it happening, but you have to hide it. And then the sock finding becomes even more insulting because it's just so annoying. And the person who's asked you, do you know where my sock is? If they don't know, then they don't know. And I think...
And the week before, you would have dropped everything
That's
to
right.
help them look for it.
That's right.
So no wonder they're a bit confused.
Exactly. And I think, when you start to get that fizzy sort of feeling, for me, it's a real reminder that I need to spend some time by myself, and I also need to direct some of that critical, creative, crunchy energy onto something that really makes me feel like me. And
I get that feeling. I never knew why. So what should you do? You need to be away from people?
Well, I think it is really good to just spend some time listening to whatever that is, because I think part of the crunchy irritability comes because there's such a massive denial of that voice. And, people, it doesn't mean you need to go out and paint the Mona Lisa or whatever makes you feel like you. It could be crocheting, it could be gardening, it could be singing, it could be dancing. It doesn't matter. And you don't need to have an attachment to the outcome. It's just that you're spending time with that creative part of yourself, and you're giving her a voice, and you're actually going in and exploring it.
So that's the four main phases, or the 4 seasons. Now I want to ask you about how you overlay that on relationships, and how the different seasons can cause us to make either good or bad decisions around our relationships, or behave in different ways inside our relationships. So it's different for whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship.
Absolutely. Which one do you want to tackle first?
Let's tackle the single ladies.
Okay.
What are the things to be wary of? I mean, I'm guessing you're gonna say that in your loving phase, is that summer?
Yep.
Be careful.
Yeah, you're going to see the potential in
everyone.
A rock, and you really... I think you have to remind yourself you're not a social worker. If you're looking for a short-term thing or a long-term thing, be really clear about what you actually are looking for. And I think for anyone who's interested in discovering themselves on a deeper level in this way, you want to just keep a track of it for a couple of months so that you can get some sort of retrospective hindsight on maybe where you were. And so,
like with a period app or something. So you can look at it and go, oh, I really feel like I'm saying that this guy has potential when he's just shown no evidence of it.
Yes.
Maybe, it corresponds with this week of my cycle.
Exactly.
Let's see how I feel about him next week.
Let's run him through autumn and see how he stacks up, in the crunch phase.
So similarly, can you be... Like in autumn, it's probably a bad idea to go on any dates because you're also going to be...
I don't know. Sometimes I think it's a great filter because you don't have all the buffers and you really do see things as they are in that moment. And I just think whenever you think to yourself, it's just my hormones, just put that in the bin and really pay attention to how you're actually feeling and maybe what you're denying. And, I mean, just because you're premenstrual doesn't mean you're a monster. It just means you're less likely to want to put up with crap. So maybe if you're going out on a date that night, you wouldn't spend all day teaching year 3s and then volunteering at an old person's home and then going out on a date. You might just try and carve out a bit of space for yourself and give yourself time to kind of recalibrate and prepare and get in the mood. And
I love what you say about we're often so dismissive, and sometimes we'll feel things that we don't really understand. And I will just go, I think it's my hormones, but I don't really know why I'm irrationally angry or wanting to start 15 projects or just adopt 14 more dogs. I like this idea about harnessing information about our hormones instead of just going, it's the hormones, I can't understand it.
Yes.
You actually can understand it with this blueprint that you have.
That's right. You can and you do. And, your phases will be different to mine. There'll be different lengths. There'll be different people will find that some of, one phase in particular comes really naturally to them and they feel really themselves. And then, other people might struggle with different phases. And so the more information you have, the more you can use that. And it's actually becomes predictable. And, before I understood this, I think I just sort of thought, maybe I just fluked that week, or I had this experience of feeling like sometimes I was really on it and then the rug was pulled out and I didn't know why. And it was this pressure to sort of be the same all the time. And it's that kind of narrative that we are, even in the Uber, that sort of challenge that you have when people ask you what you do and you think, okay, I'm going to tell them. Anyway, I was explaining to the Uber driver how I was really excited about reframing the way we think about the menstrual cycle and, that essentially men are wonderful and great, but they're fueled by testosterone, which means that although they have a little microcycle, they're generally just pumping out the same amount all the time. They're pretty linear, consistent. So because the world is often default male all the time, we're all under pressure to be linear and consistent all the time, when actually when you have a woman's hormones, you're not necessarily linear and consistent all the time. Anyway, Uber driver's totally all over that. And he said, oh, yeah, that's right, because you guys are more all over the place, aren't you? And I said, well, no, actually. We just have 4 superpowers. And then I just
I wonder how many stars you got. I was going to ask you about that and the difference between men and women before, and we will come back to within relationships, how your menstrual cycle can impact. But some people will say, and there's a branch of feminism that says we shouldn't give too much credence to our hormones and the impacts they have, because that feeds into the narrative that women
could be used against us.
Yeah, it can be used against us. It can be weaponized against us.
Yep, and it has.
People have said women shouldn't fly planes because what about when they're on their period?
That's right.
They might just, angrily fly into a mountain. What do you say to that?
Look, I think you can do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. This is just a way of really dialing up how to get the absolute cream of yourself. And it just means that if you understand what's coming, you can prepare for it even better. So you can pad out your month. And maybe you are flying planes, through mountains, and then you can just care for yourself a little bit better in the lead up, and you can have that information. And I think it just is testament to how undervalued women have been, that because we weren't men, we were inadequate, when actually we have different ways of being strong, different ways of being creative, different ways of connecting and expressing and being productive. And the world is missing out if we're not tapping into all of these
superpowers.
Superpowers, that's right.
You work with your husband, Richard. How do you guys use, because I imagine him knowing this stuff is a superpower for him as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
How do you use it within your relationship to navigate it better?
Well, we spoke just before about using it, when you're single. And obviously, if you're beginning a new relationship or you're just meeting someone for the first time, then this is kind of a lot to maybe convey on the first date, or I don't know. But in a way, it's actually not. And I met a young woman recently who said, this is now my filter. If I meet a guy and if I just sort of drop a few little things about my menstrual cycle, if he flinches or I read any sort of micro expression of he's out, because this is a part of who I am. This is actually what makes me who I am. So if you're feeling like you need to put a lid on that at the get-go, then red flag. So my relationship is completely, like all relationships, you've got to communicate these things. And, sometimes Richard will say to me, just tell me which day, just tell me what you need, tell me what's going on. And, and I will. I will say, I am in my summer phase. I have made a roast chicken. If you want to have anyone over for work, these are the 4 days. I will lay it on thick. And, and then in the following week, if I need some space or I just need him to move over a bit in bed, then he knows. And he knows it's not personal, which is the real kicker. Because when you have these sort of interactions that are mainly based on miscommunication, let's be honest, the real damage is done when people just don't understand. It's not the delivery isn't about you. It is, you know, it is how I'm feeling. It's where I'm at and it's what I need. So if you're needing some space, then, you know, you need to ask for it.
What about working with groups of women, asking for a friend? We have 80 women here at Mama
Wow.
Mia. And how does everybody's cycle impact upon that in a workplace?
Well, I guess to begin with, and this gets back a little bit to what you were saying before about people feeling safe to have that conversation and traditionally it being weaponised against you. If you've got a culture where you feel that you can communicate those sorts of things, then I just think it's absolutely limitless and infinite, the possibility of applying those strengths. And when I first discovered all of this, I was working for a youth sexual health clinic where we had about 10 women, and my boss would say to me, we worked quite closely together, and she would say to me, what phase are you in? And when's a good day to have a good planning day? And when's a good day to sort of start this project? And so, you know, obviously if you're trying to logisticize 80 women all at the same time, I'm just thinking spreadsheets and some colour coordinated post-it notes. I mean, I had a friend who was in HR for Rio Tinto, and this was about 5 years ago, and he said, I just know that one day it's going to be okay for me to talk about this at work. And I know that the potential for saying, okay, all of the summer women, you can get together and just hash this out and try and build this kind of big idea and go and get feedback and, you know, really dig into all of the ideas that everybody has. Right, the autumn premenstrual women, you can each just take a big hunk of paper and go and slash and burn and, you know,
have some quiet time. Working on a solo
cut
project.
out all the crap, you know. And, you know, if we're needing to sort of do a bit of dreaming into the big picture, then we can get all the
strategy.
That's right. And so, look, it doesn't mean that you only have 4 feelings. Obviously, there are other things going on. There's adrenaline and excitement. There could be sadness and things going on in your actual life. But these are big things going on in our body. So if you can tap in, then everything is just going to become a little bit more tweaked.
When I got my period, it was pretty no nonsense. My mum just handed me box tampons and a box of pads, and I sort of just got on with it. And that's always kind of been my attitude. I'm fortunate enough that I have not had periods.
Endometriosis.
I've never had endometriosis. My periods have never given me any trouble until recently when they became very, very heavy in my 40s, because that wasn't in the brochure, and I got a Mirena. But there seemed to be a phase sort of after that of having big period parties and celebrations when a girl gets her period in some places. What's the best way to kind of prepare your daughter for having her period? And then how should you react? Should you make a big deal? Should it be you're a woman? Because that in itself can be pretty confronting for a 12-year-old.
Or 10. It's like, I'm a woman.
Yeah,
actually,
or
I just
10,
want to
exactly.
go and swing on the monkey bars.
Yeah. I have one friend whose mother, whenever her daughters got their period, she'd give them a cuddly toy to sort of say, it's okay, it's not scary, you can still be a kid.
Yep.
What's the best way to handle it?
I think the very first thing as a mother, if that's who we're talking to, is to really try and model as much self-care as you can, because that obviously has so much impact on a girl who then watches how her mother treats her own body and cares for herself. And, you know, the whole idea of communicating periods in a way that is not just sort of one conversation, so that you don't need to talk about it every day over breakfast, but it's a part of your life. So if you're feeling something, then talk about it and be open.
And it's important for our sons to hear this as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
To expose them to it.
That's right. Because, you know, they're going to grow up and have relationships with women and
have
girls.
to buy tampons for them.
Yep, absolutely. So definitely just being open and acknowledging how you feel, if you feel tired or crampy or whatever you do to take care of yourself, so they then get that education, because otherwise you need to learn all of that in isolation. And there are so many beautiful things you can do in terms of creating a ritual, and I think that's something that is a really special way to acknowledge the changes that are going on. And I mean, I had a friend who she sent out an email to about 10 of her friends, and she said, I think my daughter is getting really close to the time. Could you think of a present that you might send her? And when she gets her first period, I will let you know, and just one by one you can start sending them in. And so she got little lavender eye pillows and a new warm scarf and all of these beautiful little things that came to her that let her know that all of these women who had been important in her life were thinking of her and were really acknowledging that transition. And I think all of those things serve to make you feel that your body is empowering, and it doesn't need to be something that you're afraid of or anything like that. It's really special. Hello, it's how we all got here.
So your show tours, the best place to find you is?
mygreatestperiodever.com or Instagram.
I can't wait to take my daughter and my sons to your show. It's amazing. And this idea of being able to life hack your period, I'm all about it now. Thank you so much. High five. Thanks for listening to No Filter. I am so interested in Lucy's work and what she says, and emailing her is just a whole other experience. She starts every email or every text message by telling me where she's at in her cycle, and it's just heaven. It's really interesting, and I'm being serious. Now, next week, I speak to Rick Morton, one of my old colleagues here at Mamamia, the first guy we ever employed. He grew up the son of a cattle baron, really, like a massively rich part of the landed aristocracy in rural Queensland. But he ended up growing up in housing commission and had an incredibly tough life in poverty, and his story is amazing. It's so interesting. You'll love it. And if you enjoyed Lucy's story, I've got another recommendation for you if you're wondering what to listen to next. Why not check out our Lady Startup podcast? It's hosted by our own Lady Startup, Rachel Corbett, who has a podcast school of her own, as well as being the head of podcasts here at Mamamia. And one of my favourite interviews from this show in season 1 is her conversation with Roxy Jasenko.
The second you take your foot off the pedal and you think that someone else is going to do it for you, it's the quickest way to see a business go down.
Boy, that girl knows how to hustle. Find it now wherever you are listening to this podcast, and we will also put a link in the show notes. This show was produced by Liza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and I will see you on mamamia.com.au.